it just was a complete failure in front of them. But that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And, I kind of kept on with that track for a little while. And it's like, man, I can't lead like this. This isn't me. This is not who I am.
Welcome to The Grit Factor, reimagining grit as part of the whole person in a life that matters. I'm your host, Shannon Huffman-Polson. This season is brought to you by Tiller, the first personal finance service to automate all your daily spending and account balances into spreadsheets, so you can track everything in one place with everything customizable, strict privacy, and no ads. Try Tiller free today at tillerhq.com. Also by the Grit Institute, providing whole leader learning journeys in grit and resilience, purpose, and storytelling. Invest in your people for long-term success. Find out more at thegritinstitute.com. Jenn Donahue is a Ph.D., a civil engineer, a STEM advocate, and served for decades in uniform in the U.S. Navy until she was the most senior woman civil engineer. She has built bridges and roads from Ketchikan to Kabul, led small teams and large organizations, and taught at the university level. From all these experiences, she comes away with a deep understanding of genuine and authentic leadership, and how to get things done, no matter how difficult the task. Join me as I talk to Jenn about the hardest lessons she learned in those decades of work, and what she'd recommend to any leader starting out or finding themselves stuck. Jenn, thank you so much for joining us today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, have been your fan ever since I had a chance to meet you. I don't know how long that's been now, a year and a half, but a great fan of both your history and also the work that you're doing today. So I know that you have so much to share, and then we're really looking forward to this.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And I've also been following you as well and love everything that you guys have been doing as far as grit and just, really trying to be your genuine self and, what that really means going forward.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to get into that because I know genuine leadership is really your focus today. And it resonates really very much so with that whole leader concept in the Grit Factor. And I know that we'll have a lot to talk about. Could you give the listeners a little bit of an idea what your career looked like in the military and maybe even how you got there in the first place?
Absolutely. I am an engineer. I'm an engineer's engineer. Like I am that nerd that is an engineer, and it's my whole of my being. Whenever I was at Texas A&M, I had so much angst and I wasn't ready to go and get a job down in Houston with everybody else. And I decided, I need to see the world. And I did. And I joined the U.S. Navy and had the opportunity to travel. Like my very first duty station was in Guam. I mean, you can't get really that much farther from Texas to go all the way to Guam. And I've had the most incredible opportunities to see Alaska and Puerto Rico. I cannot imagine where I would be today without the U.S. Navy. I've also had the ability to go to real garden spots like Iraq and also Afghanistan along the way, but those were also great learning and leadership positions as well. But again, I'm an engineer, and so what I do is expeditionary construction for typically the Marine Corps. So we go out in the middle of nowhere, we take our trucks, we point the guns out, and then we build in the middle. And that's what we do. So in Iraq, we were building bridges over the Euphrates River. We were building small villages for the Marines so that they could go out in the middle of nowhere, occupy that, and go do their job. Same thing in Afghanistan. We're actually teaching the Afghans how to build and how to be Seabees themselves so that they could better sustain themselves. So that's really what I do. I've been all over the world and I build. That's what I do.
Well, that's a pretty amazing career and an amazing thing to be able to say that you do when right now we really need to be building as a whole world, as a whole community, right?
Absolutely. We look to build in ourselves, and externally as well. And
yes.
If you're trying to build yourself, that's something that I think is really important in order to try to make yourself better. But at the same time, the very physical act of building is also so important, for our entire community.
Absolutely. And there can't have been very many women doing this. I can't imagine.
No, I was typically one of the only females in the room. In my engineering class, there was only 2 of us females. And in the U.S. Navy Civil Engineer Corps, which is what I am, we're still only about 9% women.
Is that right?
Only 9% women. Even these days, when we have a lot more women going into engineering, there's just even fewer engineers that are going into the military as well. So that's why we're still only about 8 to 9% women across the board. I'm actually the most senior female right now, which is really kind of scary. But
no, I think they're lucky to have you. That's
thank you.
That's fantastic. Well, what was your favorite of those duty stations, if you had to pick one, or your favorite job in that duty station, which might be different?
My favorite job was in Alaska. I was with the Naval Construction Battalions, and I had the great opportunity to take 18 people to Alaska, and we drilled and blasted across an island. We were there for the Metlakatlan Indians, and they needed a road from one side of the island to the other, especially in the wintertime, because the winters are just so harsh there. They needed a safe harbor. And so I literally drilled and blasted for 6 months in Alaska, slept in a little wooden hut, and it really was a blast. I mean, I hate the fun of that, but I mean, it was so much fun. And I got such an opportunity to get to understand who I was as a leader. I was a junior officer, and here I am, I'm out on an island with 18 guys. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but luckily I had a really good mentor, and he really helped me to understand who I was and who I could be as a leader. And so that's why it was also so much fun, is I really got to develop myself.
That's amazing. And am I right? This was off of Ketchikan?
It is right off of Ketchikan.
Okay. All right. I love that tagline that you have in some of your material that says from Ketchikan to Kabul. I think that's spectacular. And as a native Alaskan, I'm particularly proud that that was your favorite place to be. So that's terrific.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, tell me a little bit, actually, before we go too much farther, about what it is that you learned from that mentor, because that's a really big thing that's coming up again and again, is that need for us to work together in a team. That's chapter 3 of the Grit Factor, is none of us do this alone, right? But it's really fortunate when you do have a mentor that can help you to develop those skills that you need to go further and to contribute your best.
Well, it came off of an epic failure of leadership. And so it was the perfect timing to have a good mentor. And so my mentor was Chief Ed Willis.
Okay.
And he taught me everything.
Was he?
Sorry, I even get like a little choked up, because it's like, I really owe so much to him, because he helped me become the leader that I am today. And that's why, he just has like a special place in my heart.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Can you remember a specific instance where you were struggling maybe, and he helped to direct you in a certain direction, or was it more on the technical side, or how did you work with him?
So he technically was very astute at drilling and blasting, but he was also he'd been in the Navy for, something like 22 years, like an old crusty chief, that they always talk about in the Navy, always have like that cup of coffee with them, no matter where they are. And he was great, because I had these guys that I was in charge of, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And so he was great about just sort of whispering in my ear a little bit, like, hey, have you thought about maybe addressing them this way? And he said, hey, why don't you ask them what they think is going to be better for their team, as opposed to you always telling them what they need to do. And he started to get more of a conversation between me and my troops. And so I really had a better understanding, and they knew a whole lot more than what I did. But for some reason, I thought, because I was the officer, that I knew everything. And so therefore, I'm the one who's going to give the directions. But by being able to listen to my troops and what they needed, and how they were working, and how they could work better, and different resources and tools and everything else that I could give to them, once I started to really listen to them, and I could do something for them to help them do their job better, oh man, we were humming, we were really clicking, and we really made a great team. But it was really him just sort of being my ear, and making me understand that, hey, just because I'm the officer doesn't mean that I know everything. I need to listen, and I need to respond appropriately to these troops.
That is incredibly powerful. As any leader knows, young leader or old leader, we've all been there, and we all need an Ed Willis. Wow, that's incredible.
Yes. Wow. And he was great, and he didn't take any credit for it, and he didn't try to be pompous about it and say, oh, you're just a little 24-year-old, what do you know? He was really interested in helping me develop to be, comfortable with who I was.
Right.
And that's what really made all the difference.
What an amazing story. I love to hear stories of good mentors. It's not common, frankly, right? Most of us have a hard time finding a mentor or have a hard time being mentored one way or the other. If somebody were to ask you about that and say, hey, I need a mentor, how would you go about it? What would you say?
I would say the first thing is you need to ask.
Yeah.
Like, look around, and you know what? It is so empowering whenever you ask somebody to be their mentor, because guess what? When you're asked to mentor somebody, wow, that is such a huge honor. It's like, oh my gosh, somebody thinks enough of me that they want me to mentor them. And I'm like, man, I am going to give everything that I can to help this person. And a lot of people don't understand that. But if you just have the courage to just go up and ask somebody, it's like, hey, I'd really like you to be my mentor, man, they are going to probably say yes in a heartbeat. But I would also say, when you're looking at mentors, don't have just one. At least start with one. You have to start somewhere. But maybe think of a board of directors. Like for myself, I have 4 mentors right now. One of them is a technical genius, and he's really helped me be better at engineering seismology, which is what I do whenever I'm not speaking. I have one that is great at business, and he's started companies, and he is very talented. I have one that's really good at work-life balance. And then I have another one who's more of a leadership mentor, because not one mentor has everything that I need for myself. And I find a little bit in each one of them. And so I would absolutely recommend to anybody, if you're going to have a mentor, start looking at that board of directors, because that's probably going to make you more of a holistic person.
And that is great advice. That is such great advice. And that does come up again and again, is don't always have mentors that look like you, and don't only have one, right? And then the last thing is always be a mentor also, right? Yes. That you want to both build your own board of directors, but you want to be sure that you're helping out on somebody else's board of directors as well. And I know you do that with genuine leadership.
And that's why it's so important to me, because I feel like I never had a mentor growing up. Right. I didn't. There was just not anybody who I was like, I want to go ask that person. And it really wasn't a big deal back in the 80s and the mid 90s. It wasn't really there. And until somebody actually asked me to mentor them, that's when all of a sudden that light bulb went off, and I realized, oh, wow, maybe I need a mentor. And so I started doing all this research about how do I become a mentor, because I'm a nerd and I have to research things.
I love it.
And so that's how I started to mentor others, is I had to understand what it was to begin with. And now I realize I have been given so much opportunity, and I've made so many mistakes. And it's like, man, if I can help others, not make those same mistakes and avoid these pitfalls and obstacles, they're going to have life so much better. And so I've really tried to look down and say, hey, how can I help others? And that's a big part of like what I've been striving for the last couple of years.
I love that. And I know we're going to come back around to that in just a moment. So thank you. It's really comes from your heart and from your work. And it's very, very clear in everything that you do. So thank you for showing up in the world that way for so many.
Thank you.
One of the things that you just mentioned were pitfalls and obstacles. And I know that this is something that comes up so often. And in the last is this fear of failure, right? Both the fear of failure and then how it is that we get through it, and being willing to take risks and being willing to be audacious. This is something, again, that came out of the interviews of the leaders for the Grit Factor and Commit, Learn, and Launch. In that launch phase, you've got to be audacious, right? You've got to be willing to take risks and ask for what you want and put yourself out there and really, really try things that you don't even know that you can succeed at. But sometimes that results in failure. And I always like to say, it's not failure that matters. It's what you do with it that counts. And I know you have a great story about exactly that. I wondered if you'd share that with us.
Absolutely. So before I had Chief Ed Willis, I had nobody. And I got to my construction battalion, and I'd never led anybody in my entire life. And I was now put in charge of 14 people in the admin department. Wow. And so in the Navy, the admin department is so important because all of the letters and correspondence and evaluations, they all go through our hands. And the evaluations are so important because they help people get promoted to the next level.
Right.
Well, I was the admin officer right before some very important evaluations had to go out. And so I thought, okay, great. And so I took this huge stack of evaluations and I brought it into my boss, which was the executive officer. And I went back to my office. And what I didn't realize is that he whipped out his red pen and he just crucified those things. I mean, red ink everywhere. There's like ink literally like dripping off of these evaluations. I mean, it looks like a bloody massacre. I mean, it's horrible, horrible. And he gives them back to me and he yells at me and he demeans me and like, I can't believe you gave this to me. This is crap. How dare you even give this to me? And I'm like, oh, wow. And I was like, oh, that's real bad. That's bad. So I take the evaluations and I bring them back to my team and say, hey, we need to fix these. The boss is not happy. You know, we go through all night and we get them all done and we think we got everything that he wanted. And I grab the stack and I bring it back to the boss, and he takes out his red pen again. And I mean, he just goes to town and he just trashes them and he demeans me and everything else. And, you know, I'd never led anybody. And so I was like, oh man, I should probably try this leadership thing. And so I was like, okay, well, what do my leaders do? Well, they yell at me to make me do what they want me to do. And so I thought, okay, well, I guess to lead people, you have to yell at them. So I was like, okay. So I take the papers back, go into the admin office, and I slam them down on the desk, and I yell at them, and I tell them that they're worthless, and I cannot believe that they would give this crap to me. How dare they? I can't even believe that they're in the United States Navy and they're giving me this shit. Like, what are you doing? Like, you are going to fix this. You're going to fix this before I get in the morning. And I don't want to hear anything about it. And it better be right. And it better be right on. And it better be exact. And I left and I slammed the door and I left.
Wow.
And you know what? I'm still ashamed of how I acted. I mean, that's not how leaders are supposed to act. And man, I went home that night and I just had to sit there, and I was sitting there with a glass of wine thinking, oh man, if this is how I have to lead people in the Navy, man, I don't think I want to be part of this. Like, this is, you know, just like right there, right in the pit of your chest, just like, this doesn't feel right. This feels awful. And I'm like, I can't do this.
Right.
And you know what? My whole team, you know, they saw right through me. You know, any trust that I ever had with them, completely obliterated it. You know, I lost all confidence that they might have had in me to begin with. You know, it just was a complete failure in front of them, you know, but that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And, you know, I kind of kept on with that track for a little while, and it's like, man, I can't lead like this. This isn't me. This is not who I am. And it's just one of those just epic failures where it's just like, I thought I was supposed to be something else. Like, I thought I was supposed to be this big, bold, fearless, yelling leader in order to get people to do what I wanted them to do. And that was like, man, that's why I was so thankful for Ed Willis after this, because he was really able to take me aside and say, you know, he looked at me, he's like, man, you're not a yeller. That's not who you are. He's like, you're a listener and you care about people. And I didn't realize that I could use those traits to try to be a better leader, you know, in the future. But that was like, man, talk about an epic failure. That was definitely my failure.
But Jenn, that's amazing that you could see that you could feel it in your body. I just talked to somebody this morning about how this mind-body connection is real, right? Mm-hmm. We can feel it in our bodies when something is amiss, and that you could feel that and identify that. And even if it took a mentor, right? In fact, it often takes a mentor to pull us out of that you could redirect. That's pretty amazing.
Right. And it was one of those items where I just sort of look almost at Chief Willis to say, oh my gosh, you probably saved my life. You know, who knows? I probably would have gotten out of the Navy, done something else, but he helped me be who I really needed to be. And again, it goes back to like, you have to feel comfortable with yourself and the decisions that you make and how you treat people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I feel like this is such a good story story and experience that you're willing to share, which I want to say thank you for, because that's incredibly generous. Not just about audacity. And I can remember myself in that as that young leader too, right? It takes you've got to kind of muster up the courage each time you go in that way, however it is that you're going in, because you know that you're new and you know that you're young and you know that you're supposed to be in charge, and one way or the other, you're supposed to show that. But so that is audacity, and it is failure that you overcame, but it's also learning this really important thing, I think, especially for women leaders, but this is true for men and women, is that you have to be authentic to who you are in order to be able to lead in a sustainable way. And that's a very hard lesson to learn.
It really is. And it took me several months to actually get there. And it takes some people even longer. You need to be really self-aware. That's really the first part of this, and understanding who you are and your strengths and your weaknesses.
Yes.
really starts there so that you can really be your genuine self and show up, because then you're going to start to earn trust with your team. They're going to want to follow you. They want to be dedicated and loyal, and they want to stick with you. But if you're just trying to be someone that you're not,
yes,
they're not going to follow you. I mean, they're going to look at you like, she's trying to be something that she's not, and I don't want any part of that, because it just looks like a train wreck, and nobody wants to be part of the train wreck.
That's a good way to put it. What do you say to people who are working in an environment? And I'm actually thinking of myself and my own failures here, because I think finding who I authentically was as a leader was something I had a hard time doing with a particular cohort. And there was such pressure in the combat arms, right? To be that person that you're describing. And I could do it. I played sports. I'd done all that stuff where there's a lot of physical energy, and there's kind of that physical energy manifested in how we present to other people. But how do you find a way to be who you are authentically as a leader in an environment where the pressure to be another way is so intense?
I call it my camouflage. So, so as a CD, as a construction battalion person, we wear our green camouflage all the time. And so I always kind of nickname it like I had to put my camouflage on. Yes. And it's something that I've really become comfortable with also, is that I can still be my authentic self, but at the same time, sort of project myself as somebody larger. And it's taken me a little while to try to figure that out and be comfortable with that. But I think it's absolutely okay, because all you're doing is taking your natural strengths and just amplifying them. Yes. And I have found that it's like, we talk about also, and you probably understand this also, sort of our left and right lateral limits of like what we can do. And I find that I have to open that spectrum for different people. Like there's some people, and I've worked in the construction industry where you have these big burly, type of, construction contractors that are like, and, you have to go up and it's just like, you don't blink. You're just like, this is what I need to get done. And this is how we need to do it, and it's like, you just be very straightforward. And that's one end of the spectrum. But then at the other end of the spectrum, I've worked with people that if I acted that way, I'd probably send them crying to the bathroom. You just have to understand and read people and understand, like, okay, how do I need to communicate with these different people in order to get them to do what I need them to do? And you have to be comfortable with that spectrum. And sometimes you have to start out really small until you feel comfortable, looking the 6'6" contractor in the eye and saying, no, you need to do it this way.
Right.
And so I think that's all a part of it, is understanding, what makes you feel comfortable and then growing into what you can actually accomplish.
And that is a huge amount of wisdom right there, is being able to make that distinction and how people need to be addressed and how it is that you need to work with them, right? Based on the environment and who they are. And that's as an experienced leader talking there. So I appreciate you sharing that wisdom. And that's some wisdom that takes a while to develop, I imagine.
It did. But actually, it started out pretty early. The Navy really prepared me for that, because I got thrown into some really wild situations, where I did have to come up and be, big and bold and, stand up for myself. And so I had to do that. And so that was part of my training in order to get me to that point. And so whenever I got out of the Navy and started out in the civilian construction, like I already had that, like this big 6'6", probably 280-pound guy, was trying to come down on a little blonde girl and tell her what to do. And it's like, nope. Just back off. It's like, you're not scaring me. I've had generals yell at me. I've had admirals yell at me. It's like, you're not scaring me. And so really it was a lot of that, like really early on, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure that helped build to that. But everybody, even if you're not in the military, you grow with all of these different experiences that you have. And as long as you're growing along with those, then it's just going to make you stronger in the end.
Right. Well, we like to say that you get better at doing hard things by doing hard things, right? That's part of building that grit and resilience, in addition to the wisdom. I mean, that wisdom is part of building grit and resilience. So you don't have to just muscle through things. You can actually make some discerning choices along the way, I think.
Right. Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, how has that career, and I love that you've built bridges across the Euphrates and been from Ketchikan to Kabul. I mean, it's quite amazing, actually, as one of the very, very few women and usually the only woman in the room. So how does that lead into what it is that you're doing today? And how did you make the decision about the direction that you wanted to go?
Well, I was in the military for several years, and then I got out into the civilian life. Well, what happened was that I met this incredibly handsome guy on Guam,
Oh, no.
And then he joined the FBI and he got stationed permanently in San Francisco. So I had to get off of active duty in order to be with him. And that's how I got off active duty and into the reserves. Now, whenever I was in the construction industry, like I just started to notice, like, I was like in my late 20s, like nobody was really getting any leadership training at all. It was like, here's technically what you need to do. And they went on with that. I went on to another couple of corporations. And what I noticed also is that they really weren't giving any leadership training to these young engineers and young scientists. Well, we know in the military, man, leadership starts at day one with you got a drill instructor yelling and spitting in your face. That's right. When they start leadership, and about teamwork and all of that and what that really means.
Right.
But I was finding that by the time that people were getting to be those mid-managers, that's when they're like, oh, you're a mid-manager. You need to go to leadership training.
Right.
Well, all that time they had, all these bad habits that they had created and looking at their leaders who had bad habits. And it was this thing that was perpetuating itself. That was just bad leader after bad leader after bad leader in that middle management piece.
Right.
And I was like, man, this has got to change. And so I started a little grassroots type of leadership training at one of the corporations that I was with to say, hey, this is how we should probably look at as leaders, before you get to that middle management position. And it became so important to me because these young engineers and these young scientists that I was around, it's like they wanted to learn more. They wanted to understand that they wanted to be the next leaders of the corporation.
Right.
And if they don't get that leadership training early on, when are they going to get it? When they've already made all these bad decisions and bad habits? And so that's why I've been so passionate over the last couple of years of trying to do my own grassroots, leadership training. And now that I'm in the position that I am, it's time to give back. So I would like to give back and I want to help others become better leaders. Man, learn from my mistakes. I have all kinds of here's little just tips and tricks about how to build trust with your team. And, here's what you need to think about when you're in a crisis. All of these things that I've learned over the last 20 years, I want to help others. And if we can start early enough, then they're going to start to grow with those really good habits. And we're going to have better middle managers and we're going to have better corporations, all in all. So that's what I've been so passionate about over these last couple of years.
Well, I love that. And it's very much reflected in the work that you're doing and the way that you're showing up in the world. So it's wonderful to see. And that is a huge benefit to all of us. Would you describe that passion? And I love that you use the word passion there. And I love it in part because it's so important, but it also aligns very much and often with a sense of purpose. And I wonder if you would describe the work that you're doing right now as purpose-driven and how it is that you define that purpose.
Absolutely. I don't think you're going anywhere in life if you don't have a purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose is really what drives us and it pushes us in a particular direction. That's the way that I look at it. And so my purpose right now is to try to help young engineers, scientists, medical professionals, financial professionals. My purpose is to try to help them be better leaders from the get-go. To me, that's my purpose. And it's a passion. And the passion is what fuels all of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have always asked people how they defined grit. And of course, Angela Duckworth will define grit as passion and perseverance towards very long-term goals. I really think of that as the direction of purpose, really, and that your core purpose can be found at that intersection between that passion, right, and that core purpose. So we can find grit inside of ourselves, inside of every single one of us, if we're able to do that work to identify that purpose. So I love that you can articulate that so well. How has that given you strength when, I don't know, maybe things seem like they're tough? It's certainly been tough for a while for all of us, or confusing, or you're tired. How does that give you the strength or bolster your resolve?
Well, unfortunately, I decided to start public speaking right at the very beginning of the pandemic. I mean, that is the absolute worst timing ever. So it was very difficult and I had to find my own way. And how do I get this up and running and give it momentum? And I have to go back to that purpose. It's basically like your why. Why am I doing this? Why do I want to help others? What is my purpose? And I have to go back to that whenever I start to get discouraged and I think, man, this is never going to happen. And maybe I'm not going to be able to help as many people as I can. I have to go back to just take a step back, take a deep breath, recenter, think about what that purpose is. I'm here to try to help other people. Okay. Now I can like restart. Okay. How can I restart? Okay. Maybe let's go in this direction. Maybe let's go try that. Let's go try something else.
Absolutely.
As long as you just stop and like take a deep breath and just remind yourself, what is my purpose? What is my why? Why am I passionate about this?
Yes.
Then you go find a new trail. There's always new trails that you can go and try to follow.
Absolutely. And it's something that comes up, I feel like, in conversations right now with people in every single industry, which is what do we do when we don't really know what the future is like, and when things have been really tough and the supply chain is off and we're having a hard time retaining employees. I'm like, you've got to come back to that commit phase. And that's the owning your own story and owning your purpose, right? Reconnecting to that will allow you to negotiate through anything. So I love how you describe that.
Oh, absolutely. Just find your center, like you said, like find your center, understand what it is, close your eyes for a minute, and then just start running in a different direction. Maybe the first direction didn't work. Go try something else. Keep trying. That's why you're there.
Absolutely. What would you tell a young Jenn Donahue, or even a Jenn Donahue who hasn't yet left the military, somebody making a major transition or stepping into a new role?
I would say, first off, find a mentor. So
yeah.
That is so important to me. It's like, find a mentor. Because, a lot of times they've already gone before you. They figured out the pitfalls. They've figured out the obstacles and how to get around those.
Right.
Go find a mentor. Man, I was such a wild little thing running around doing, like whatever I thought was the right thing at the time. And I made things so much harder on myself than they really needed to be. If I would have just had a mentor to just bounce some ideas off of, I think it would have gone a long way. Now, there is something to say about saying, hey, you know what? I'm bold and I can go do this on my own. But yeah, go do it on your own. But, maybe have somebody to bounce ideas off of. So don't lose that identity of like, hey, I'm going to go conquer the world by myself. So even Superman has a sidekick, doesn't he? Batman does, right? He's got a sidekick.
That's wonderful. That is excellent, excellent advice, because none of us can do this alone, for sure. No. And none of us do it alone. We've got to support each other. So as a quick bonus for anybody who might be leaving the military and looking at what it is that they can do in the civilian sector, what would you recommend to them? And I know that purpose and missing that sense of purpose is a really hard thing for a lot of us, a lot of people that are making that transition, but there may be other things as well that you've picked up in your journey that you'd like to share.
I would say, well, first off, for everybody that's leaving the military, one thing to learn is that if you're angry at somebody, you cannot make them do push-ups. So it's like something that I have to remind everybody all the time. Yep, you can't make them do push-ups. And I've talked to several other officers and enlisted that I've been getting out of the Navy recently. And I always kind of bring them back and say, what do you love? What is that one thing that you love to do? Yes. And we start to talk about riffing on that and like, hey, how can you maybe spin that into something that you enjoy and actually get paid to do that? Because one of the things that I did whenever I got out is I thought I had to follow the money. And I went and I got a really good job and I was getting paid a lot of money, but man, I was so unhappy. Literally, my husband had to hold a glass of wine out the front door and say, drink this before you come in the house. It was that bad. But you know what? I was following the money and I wasn't doing what I wanted to do and what made me happy. And so I always start off that conversation as, what do you love?
Right.
But there's always a way to find a way to get there. Yeah, the money might not be there at first, but you know what? There is a way to get to be happy. And you have to figure out what that is first. Don't just jump at, oh, they're offering me this much money and I'm worried because the military has all this stability.
Right.
Take a little bit of time, understand who you are, understand what you love, and then go try to capitalize on that.
I love that, Jenn. I think that's so important. And it's interesting. I just had the same conversation this morning with somebody about how challenging it is when you have all of these pressures outside of you defining what success looks like. And at some point in our lives, at least for me, it was certainly true that I started to feel really inauthentic. I mean, not just in how I was leading. I feel like I moved a little bit through that, but then not realizing that I wasn't doing what it was that I was supposed to be doing. And we're all meant to be here in this world and contribute our very best gifts, right? But to do that, we've got to know where it is that we should be. And that takes some discernment and really blocking out those external voices to say, what am I meant to do here in this world? How am I meant to show up? And how am I meant to contribute my very, very best?
I think it takes a lot of stopping for a couple minutes. Yes. We are usually always like, oh, I have to get to the next thing. I have to get to the next thing. I have to figure out how to do this. And a lot of times we're not stopping long enough to just sit and reflect and think.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I'm just not that great at, but it's something that I'm trying to train myself to be better about. But if we're able to just give ourselves like maybe that half an hour to just stop and think and really just understand like what it is. Okay, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? As opposed to always thinking, oh, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to run over here. I need to run over there. If we stop and think for a couple minutes, it's amazing what we can do.
It is amazing. And I think with the military, we come at things with a bias for action, right? We've been rewarded for being able to act and be decisive. And there's a time and a place for that. But it turns out that the time and the place for that is more limited than perhaps we're led to believe while serving in uniform.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're in the middle of the desert and you just found out that your convoy got hit, now's not the time to sit and reflect. Now is the time to make those immediate actions, and you practice that and you're ready to go. But when you're just, if you have a little bit of downtime, that's when you can stop and take those couple moments for yourself. So not in a crisis, not saying stop and reflect on yourself and, kumbaya in a crisis. I'm saying it's do what you need to do for that. But when you're not, have that small time just to yourself.
Jenn, that is wonderful, hard-earned wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate having your voice and your story, both on this podcast, but also out in the world. And it's a real privilege to know you.
Oh, thank you so much. I've had such a good time talking to you. So many insights I've also received from you. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. You can stay on. I'm going to
Okay.
Anyway, so thank you very much. I feel like I wish you lived closer because, it'd be fun to hang out. But I'm grateful that you share what you know and that you're doing your good work. So,
thank you. Well, I was gonna say we're not really that far away. I think.
No, we're not. Yeah.
I think probably Hood River's maybe halfway or something like that. Maybe. How far are you from Hood River?
Probably 5 or 6 hours, maybe driving. That's not that far.
Okay.
How far are you? Yeah, you're still in San Francisco though, right?
Oh no, we live in Bend.
Oh, you're in Bend now. That's right.
Yes.
We will certainly be traveling there for skiing. I'm almost certain because the kids will, actually one of them is just showing up right now. But we'll have ski races. And I think my oldest is likely to be, I don't know if he'll be I assume he will be. He's 6th grade. He should be. Anyway, they often travel to Bend to race. So I would imagine.
That's awesome.
Yes, I should have known that. I did know that. I just, I blanked it. So yeah, that would be very cool to link up.
Go out there, have dinner, get a beer, go do whatever, go skiing together. I mean, it would be so much fun. Yes, please.
Absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, for sure. And then if you're ever up in the Metro, we have an apartment that's separate from the house, so you can, it's COVID safe and everything, and heaters under the table outside. We do outdoor meals. Anyway, we're almost all vaccinated, but we're still trying to be careful. And man, it's a tough time for sure. So.
Oh yeah. So I don't even know, are kids able to get vaccinated now or not, or what's going on there?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So our 8-year-old just got his first shot on Saturday, and he will get his second shot on the 4th of December. And the little guys below 5, I don't think are yet, but so that's tricky, but they're not. You can come say hi because I'm off my.
Can I get it on November 15th?
November 15th. It is already past November 15th, sweetie. That was yesterday.
No, December 15th.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so yes, so our youngest is 8, almost 9, and they just were able to become vaccinated. So, or it was just became available. I guess they approved it a little while ago, but then the little guys are still have some time. It's a tricky thing, and I really hate the politics of all of this. I hate it. I mean, I hate that public health has been by politics, and it totally has, and I think it is a co-opting. I don't think there's any question, although it's both the extreme right and the extreme left. It's both sides are anti-vaxxers. And I'm like, come on, you guys, this is the reason that we're not all dead right now is because we have vaccines. I mean, talk to the Gates Foundation,
I know. And it's one of those things where it's you've also been in the military, man, there's so much other stuff that they've stuck me with. I mean, I've had anthrax and all kinds of other stuff. It's just add it to the cocktail, just bring it all in. It's fine, But
and that's why the military people that are turning it down, I'm like, give me a break. You don't even know what they've put in you.
Oh yeah. It's like all of a sudden now you're saying no. It's like, do you know what you just got like a year ago? Like, come on. Yeah. So we're actually having a hard time, especially the active duty, not so much. With the reservists, we're having a really hard time. About 20% of the reservists have basically said, I'm not going to get it. And I mean, I know master chiefs they're like, nope, I'm not going to get it. I'm out. And it's just like, you're throwing away what? Like, it's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
That is a total, I mean, it's like, it is I can't even come up with my words today. I'm sorry. But there's obviously this very targeted communication campaign that is politics and the way that they've co-opted religion, they're co-opting this as well. And it's just beyond comprehension to me that we're in this place that we are, but
totally agree with you.
It's anyway, I'm all for public health and us not dying from awful diseases that make you not able to breathe. So
same here.
Just a small thing.
Well,
how is there anything I can do to be help? I don't know what it would be, but if there's anything I can do, is there anything I can do to be helpful or supportive of you and your work? Because I would love to do it besides this. And what I'm going to do, actually, just before you answer that,
okay.
My plan on this is to do all of the recordings, and it will likely start to be because the podcast team is going to put things together to release probably starting in mid-February, and then kind of do an announcement on International Women's Day. So it's a little ways out, but that lets us edit and shape and do things, and do some little outtakes, I think, because I'd like some outtakes for people that are transitioning military just as a Benny. And I'm not going to necessarily stick with all military people either, but mostly military. So there's an Olympic athlete and some other folks that are pretty cool. And I'm like, why not add some voices,
Oh, awesome.
So yes, but having said that, besides that, what else can I do how can I support you?
I'm still, everything has been going really well. I'm still just working on I've got the resume builders and still working on the revenue builders. That's the one part that I'm still not doing great at, but you know what? I've had some great opportunities. I've got some great footage, just working on how do I get the revenue and just, trying to find the right people to call. That's been one of the harder parts is just because I'm just so new at this and trying to figure out I don't even know what to call. So I've got some, that's really where I'm at right now. And
I think the only thing I know from at least from my experience is that it just is like staying in the game, it's just the time. And it just is frustrating because you're like, hey, I can do this right now. I'm ready. And it just, people have to, I think this is the same with writing and with everything else is it's literally, there's a staying in the game component that might be the biggest piece.
Right. I think so.
You have the quality, not everyone does, but it is the staying in the game that ends up getting picked up regardless of the quality. And I think you will have both of those. So I'm not worried.
Oh, thank you.
But if there's something that I can't take, and actually, I should refer you to another podcaster, the guy that I just talked to this morning. I really liked him. His name was Philip Nathraim, and he has a DC local leaders podcast. And actually, Allison Levine recommended me to him.
Oh, neat. Okay.
And you know her anyway, so I'll recommend you to him as well. And he's just a thoughtful guy, and I think he's been on a sobriety journey, but is interviewing, like he interviewed Allison, he interviewed the head of, Pentagon Federal Credit Union. And so he's a real deal. Although I don't think, I'm not sure how any of us get on Tim Ferriss, but if one of us does, we'll have to pull all the other ones on. So, although I don't even like Tim Ferriss, to be honest. So I'm like, it's all right. It's not worth it.
Oh, goodness.
I'll refer you to Philip. And then if there's something that I can't take, I would love to send it your way too.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And as items come up as well for me, I'll say, hey, you know what, hey, you should go also talk to Shannon. I think because I love to be able to refer people to others as well.
Likewise. So. I love that. And so one last question, just because I'm developing, I just had somebody reach out to put together a proposal for something that is both bigger and a little different than I normally do. But do you do training, like workshop type stuff? And if
I do some of it, yes.
And what kind of focus do you do if you do that?
Well, so basically start off with you have to be self-aware. And so going through all of that, you have to be yourself. And also you have to, basically kind of going through those 3 steps. Like the whole self-aware part, you can take a long time for that and really understanding who you are, your strengths, your blind spots, how those are perceived by others. And I usually have people go through that. I have another module that I go through where I say, hey, tell me, we kind of do it 2 ways. It's like, hey, what are the leadership traits of the person that you most want to emulate?
Yes.
Like, who is that person? And like, what are their 3 traits? And then I ask, hey, think of somebody in history and, what were their 3 traits? They were leaders, and they're not the same. I mean, they're completely different.
Right,
and it's like,
right.
And so basically, I try to show is like, hey, look, these are the traits where people actually want to follow you.
Yeah.
These are traits, like, they're not showing up on this list over here. Like,
Right.
And so everybody thinks, oh, you had to be a good leader to do this.
Yes.
And so like, I kind of take people through those types of exercises to understand. And then we go back to like, hey, here's my strength. Okay. I'm empathetic. That's who I am. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Empathy is like way up there and like, cool, so, things like that. To make people understand, it's like, hey, you need to understand those and like go dive into those and make those better.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, absolutely. And this thing that they've asked me to put together is more on a resilience and grit thing. But I have this idea that I haven't, and maybe it just can say at this level of being casual, but like, if I was asked to put together a program for a group and that fit into the program, I feel like what I want to be able to do is draw people in, like say, hey, Jen will do this part, and like, John will do this part or whatever. So I feel like there's opportunities somehow, and I don't totally know what they look like yet for the synergy among what all of us are doing. Right. And because it's all slightly different or different approaches or whatever, but at the end of the day, like, I think there's a lot of connection, and I really want to find a way to make that connection. And I don't know what it is yet, but I just wanted to throw it out there into the space to you as we were talking. And if anything comes to mind, let me know. But that's one thing I can imagine, is putting together a program for somebody where there's different components and, you're yeah.
Well, that's the one thing that I love about what we do, is that we all come at it from a different direction.
Yes.
And so you have a very different direction than maybe what I do. And then I have a different direction than somebody else.
Yes.
But between maybe you and me and one other person, somebody's in that whole audience is going to be like, hey, I can really relate to her, or hey, I can really relate to him.
Exactly.
And so because like everybody needs something different and everybody learns in different ways. And so having the same but slightly different, I think is very helpful for people, because everybody listens different, everybody communicates different, everybody internalizes things different, and stories that you have, will resonate really with some people, and some of they'll be like, oh my God, that was me yesterday, that kind of thing. So that's the way that I look at it.
Yes, no, I agree. Well, I'm continuing to think about it. I just more and more, it just feels like there's an opportunity for that. And I don't know, again, what it completely looks like, but we'll sort it out. So we'll figure it out as we go. Perfect.
And, all right. And so I'm sorry I'm not maybe as audacious, or maybe I didn't come off as audacious as like I needed to, but.
Oh, what do you mean? I thought you were great.
I never think of myself as audacious. So that's why I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm who I am.
I mean, honestly, you silly. Wait, you want to come say hi? No. Okay. He has an umbrella on his head. I feel like, the things that you do as a young military officer are, they're not comprehensible by the rest of the population, right? I mean, I had a good friend, I remember, and he was making, 10 times what I made as a not 10, but maybe 5 times as much as we made as lieutenants. But he was working at Procter & Gamble, which is like a really like big, like high profile, whatever. And he said, yeah, but I'm like making shampoo and you're flying Apaches. And people can't even comprehend. And, it's so interesting. And I also, I have 2 other, I'm just going to throw this out there. This has nothing to do with anything that I'm writing or working on right now. But the people, like when I think back about leadership, this is just sort of shooting the breeze here, but working with soldiers was something that felt natural. Like I never had issues with soldiers. I mean, I had soldiers misbehave and whatever. But like my warrant officer pilots, wow. I mean, that was tough. And it was so different that where I had the biggest challenge, and I had some great warrant officers too, but as a whole, that was by far the hardest thing to manage. Oh yeah.
And crusty guys. Yes.
And they weren't even old. they were just them. And they were mostly great, but not all of them, not all of them at all. And the other thing I wonder, and I feel like there could be a study on this, and I actually wonder this relative to and I don't want to go down this road because I feel like you get pigeonholed, but on the harassment and assault piece in the military, I have a suspicion that it happens much more often if you are a single woman.
Mm.
I don't know. Like, I really wonder if there's any data. I doubt there is. But I kind of want to do like even an informal survey, but because I feel like when I hear some people talk about things as married, who got married, maybe as a lieutenant or whatever, and they had kids, it's completely different than what your experience is as a single woman. And I'm really curious about that, but I don't know what.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it also, this just kind of goes back to like what I was used to. So I was one of the first females in the battalion because they opened it up, I'm a couple years junior to you. And so I was one of the first females in the battalions. But I'm an engineer. Like I'm used to guys all the time, on my block. I grew up and I was like climbing trees and jumping fences because they were all boys. And like I go through my AP classes and math and science, they're all boys. I go through engineering, it's all boys. And so I was like used to it. I'm like, oh, I'm just like part of another old boys club.
Yeah.
But the females that also came in, maybe the supply officers, and there was one other female that came in, they hadn't had that experience. Right. And they didn't know how to blend very well. And they really got harassed. And it was to the point where it's like, I had to go in, like I dressed down the senior chief, like right in front of everybody, because he was giving the supply officer, hard time, and she was also a Lieutenant JG, but it was like one of those things where it's like, I don't think she was used to just being around all guys like all the time. And but I did. And it's like, I knew how to joke and laugh with them. And I think that was a big piece of like how I was able to kind of blend in and not stick out and be ostracized.
Yeah.
That's just sort of like my own opinion.
Right.
That's a Jenn Donahue opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it'd be an interesting study. I don't know what it would lead to. I don't think it would lead to anything helpful, which is why it's not that interesting to explore, although it's just a suspicion that I have, but anyway, who knows? I
will say it's a lot better.
Is it
now in the, especially in the 2000s, we are not having anywhere near the same amount of sexual harassment issues. I mean, I will say within the CBs for what I'm in, we are doing really, really good. Even though we are only like 8 to 9% women still, that's not a factor. Right. That's not a factor anymore. There's obviously other stuff, but that harassment, sexual harassment, and it's pretty much gone. It's great to see.
Awesome to hear, because I feel like in some places the numbers are still super high, and it's
I think so.
Marines and other places.
Oh yeah, Marines.
Anyway,
love Marines, but wow, yeah,
exactly. Come on, you guys, let's go. Well, thank you for this.
Thanks for listening to The Grit Factor. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and share it with a friend. Also, pick up your own copy of The Grit Factor for more candid stories and lessons from leaders in the vanguards of their fields. And invest in yourself and in your team with learning journeys in grit, leadership, purpose, and storytelling at thegritinstitute.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you'll join me for the next episode of The Grit Factor.